Hello. Shall I use the... Yeah, I think we should use the microphone because today we're here on the Paris campus, but this conference about Canada, moving to Canada, finding a job, an internship in Canada, is broadcasted live through YouTube Live for our EMLYON communities all around the world. So even if we don't have a full room, we need to use the microphone so our mates all around the world can hear us. So today we are very pleased to welcome Marilène Garceau. She's going to introduce herself. This conference is organized by EMLYON Career Center, and I hope you're going to learn many things about Canada, and who knows, maybe quite soon, next year, within 2, 5, 3 years, you will be moving to Canada. So Marilène, this is for you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So, international careers, yours and mine. So before I talk about myself, I'd like to ask you guys a few questions. First of all, has your international career started? How many of you have worked in other parts of the world? About half the room, and I guess you all want to work abroad eventually? Or you come from abroad, so you had the chance to... Have you ever traveled to your next working destination? Meaning, there's a place you want to go. Have you seen it before? Okay, it's really interesting. Sometimes it's cheaper to make a trip to understand the country than actually going and then not achieving what you want and having to come back earlier. That applies a lot for families. I know it's not your situation, but it is important, yes, to read about the country, but it's also important if you have the chance, and when you can take plane tickets that are cheaper, to go and visit and understand the country, not just for the jobs, but also the day-to-day activities and whatever hobbies you might have. My international career and company, so as you understand, I am now French-Canadian, but I'm Canadian at first. And I actually moved from Canada to France 18 years ago. I know a lot of people want to move to Canada. I'm the crazy one that did the reverse trajet. What's interesting about so I used to work in the IT business, basically project management. And the reason I wanted to work abroad is that I wanted to integrate the intercultural aspects of people's needs, the IT needs, in the solutions we were finding for them. So at that point, I wasn't saying I want to go and move to Paris. I was looking for a company that actually could provide the opportunity to work with different cultures. So at the time, it took a while to find a job, about 12 months, not 12 years. I would be very old now. No, 12 months, and I had a job offer for Australia. I had a job offer for New York City. I decided to come to Paris because at the time Capgemini Telecom said, you're going to be based in Paris, but you're going to work in Europe. And I actually worked in Spain, Slovakia, the Netherlands, Great Britain, and then came to do a big project in France where I also had a culture shock, especially in the working business. So the idea was to actually say, what do I want to do? What are the skills I have? And where can I find companies that need my skills? So I know Montreal is a big, nice city. Vancouver, Toronto, they're all really nice cities. But if you work in the finance business, Toronto or the Ontario is really nice. If you work in the car industry, Ontario, once again, is a good place. If you're interested in managing more IT companies, you've got Vancouver and Montreal. If you're like the insurance companies, you might want to go to Quebec City if you want to work in French. So it's really, really interesting to understand what the country needs before just saying, I want to go there. Because right now, at this time when we speak, there's a fair that's going on for Canada. It's called Destination Canada. It's 3 days in Paris and 1 day in Brussels. There's more than 1,500 people that go to that fair every day. So in total, they'll see between 6,000 and 8,000 or 9,000 people. So you need to tell yourself, all these people want to go to Canada. How can I make a difference? So we'll talk about that later on. So after working in the IT business for a while, the intercultural aspect of my job actually took more importance. So we created, with my 3 associates, Kennedy Garceau. So what is Kennedy Garceau? We actually manage expats for companies in Europe and in Canada. So people that want to work, or actually companies that have expatriate people. We recruit skills in Europe for Canadian companies, but not all the skills. Only the skills that they are actually lacking in the country, because I'll talk about it a little bit later, but the immigration in Canada is basically towards economy. They will not necessarily allow visas for everyone that wants to come into the country. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. And what we do, because sometimes these projects are based, they come from an individual and not from a company, or maybe there's an expat or someone that's recruited that has a spouse. We actually do all the personal development of people that want to move and work in Canada. So what can you actually do before you leave that will allow you to have a better chance in finding a company or understanding if your skills are required. So we'll talk about that as well, because there's a few tips and tricks that you can get from that. So yeah, so I was saying, most people identify a destination. I decided to go towards my skills. So as you go along, you've already had a few internships, maybe even summer jobs when you were younger. Maybe you did, I don't know, a lemonade stand where there was no money involved or no boss. But there's things that you've done in your past, even when you were young, that dictate who you are and what you can offer to companies that you would be working for. The idea as well is, at the time, and that's something you really, really need to put up front, you have one added value for sure, because we're here in France today and I'm speaking English, so most of you are either bilingual or maybe trilingual. That's something you need to put up front when you contact the companies. Because, believe it or not, in Canada, you've got French people that don't speak English, you've got English people that don't speak French, and you've got people that don't speak either languages. Throughout the country, you've got French communities. There are cities like Montreal where they ask you always if you speak English when you come as a French person to apply for a job. In Toronto, the first language is English, the working language is English, but if you do speak French or another language, Spanish or Chinese, it's actually good because the population there is pretty big. There's a lot of immigrants, and your extra skills, language skill, can actually be an added value for the company. So do not forget, and we'll go later on how to introduce yourself, the fact that you know multiple languages and that you can work in multiple language is a real information you want to give up front. So I was bilingual and they needed bilingual people. So the tip number one is, and I was talking about when you were younger, but the tip number one is to identify your interests, your forces, your strengths, sorry, I don't know how I translated that, and your weaknesses. Even though you can tell me, oh, I don't have that much work experience, I'm sure either you or people around you can help you discover what your forces, your strengths are, or what your weaknesses are. Some of you are probably really well organized and some others a little bit less. It doesn't matter. What's important is that you know what you can offer, and you eventually know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Even at your age, you can ask these questions. And while I was in Europe and traveling throughout these countries where I was working, my friends were having kids, buying a house, getting VP jobs and everything. Basically, today, it doesn't matter anymore. 18 years down the road, I became a business owner. My friends also evolved. Some of them I kept contact with, some of them I didn't. But it's not because your path is different than your friends that you actually, if you want to work abroad, go ahead and do it, and don't worry, life gets the right answers at the right moment. So there's a period where you're in décalage with your friends, and sometimes your family don't want you to leave and stuff like that. But in the end, it's really worth it, and you'll have a lot of things to offer. Networking is really something important. You'll be looking for an internship. Once again, as I was saying earlier on, a lot of other young people are looking for internship. So you can decide to actually look for job posting and apply, or you can decide to network. One thing you need to know about Canada is that 80% of the job offers are in the hidden market. So when someone gives me a job to fulfill, the first thing as an employer, like if I take the position as a Canadian employer, I'm gonna look into my network. If I can't find the skills, I'll look into my past candidates database. And if I can't find there, I'll look on LinkedIn. And if I can't find there, then I'll post it. So all the first 3 steps are really things you need to dig into, even if you're here in Europe while you're looking for a job there. So I'll give you a few ideas there. The other thing is the working environment. The HR rules are different. We can hire and let off people in 2 weeks or a few hours or a few days. So somebody that's looking for a skill in Canada, they're actually looking to fulfill the job most of the times for yesterday. You're here, you don't have a visa, and you're looking for a job in a country that has 80% of the jobs behind the scenes. So if you network and you understand where you belong, things that you like, people you can talk to, that would be a good way to start looking into. And for internships, the other thing is that companies in Canada like to invest in people. So if you call them up and saying, hi, I'm looking for a 3 months or a 6 months internship, they'll probably be really polite, but they'll probably hang up and say, why should I put the energy for an internship of 6 months when I can maybe invest in somebody for the long run? So what I'm telling you is that I'm not telling you it's a problem to be looking for an internship. I'm telling you, don't tell them that up front. Let's go back to what I was saying before about your strengths and everything you can offer, and concentrate your elevator pitch on what you can offer and what they'd like you to bring to their company, instead of just being really concentrated on, I want to find my internship. So you've got one way to look at things and saying, job offer, job offer, job offer, which is going to be really difficult, or network and put up front what I can offer, and then establish contact. And when it comes to looking for an internship, these people are going to help you. If they're not the ones that are going to hire you, they're the one They are the ones that are going to help you find a job. So networking, are you guys comfortable with networking? So? Anyone want to say how they network? No? Okay, well, we can talk about it during the questions. So when is it time to start networking? The answer is all the time. And I've put a Quebec expression here that we say tranquillement pas vite. Say you can do it, you don't have to put the pressure on yourself, but you actually can do it every day, and you can start today. You can start today with me. Maybe you don't know everybody in the room. Networking is just being here for the same reason, and maybe after say, what did you like about the conference, or what did I miss, or what would have I liked Marilyn to say. So you can even exchange between yourself if you don't already know each other. The funny thing is, actually, when I was in university in Montreal, I studied with someone, she was French, she was in Canada for a few years, and she was in my class. I, most of the time, didn't talk to her. But when I moved here 18 years ago, she's one of the first person I contacted, and since then, she's a really, really good friend. So you really don't know what the future brings, and like some contacts here can be some help in finding your internship. So where do you network? You can network here. When I introduced myself, I didn't mention I'm the president of an association that's called the Canadian Women's Group Association. And yes, it has women in its name, but we actually welcome men in the association. I don't know if you had the chance to look at the media in the last year, anything that happens in Canada, but we do have, since last November, an ambassador, which is a woman, and the 5 diplomatic roles, the Canadian roles in France, are now represented by women. So what we decided to do in the group, the association has 40 years, we said, hey, the wives usually came into the group. Now we have the husbands, and throughout time, some businessmen and some younger people, some students, have joined the association. So when I talk about networking, it could be coming to one of our event. In September, we do the Terry Fox Run, which is open to everyone. We're organizing a big party on December 8th. We have conferences. So going in places where Canadian people are is a great way to network, especially if the subject of the conference is of interest to you. Talk to your parents' friends, your neighbors. Everybody knows someone who lives or has lived in Canada. We have someone here that just came back from Canada. So talk about it. If you talk about your project, if it's Canada or another country, you'll hear people talk about the country. If you don't talk about it, they'll never know and they can't help you. So why not ask and see what happens? Conference events, I talked about it, through social network. I'll come back to LinkedIn later on. There's a lot of webinars organized by the Canadian provinces, the Canadian companies, the Canadian associations that you can have access to from your PC, from your home, in English, in French, and on different subjects. So that's another way to expand your network. I actually do a lot of webinars, and what I find is happening more and more is that people chat between themselves during the conference. So sometimes people answer somebody else's questions, and they actually make link like that, and sometimes they touch base after the conference. So why and how can I do it? The idea in networking is not to say, hey, hi, I'm looking for a job in Canada, can you help me? Is eventually understanding what they like, what they've done, and come with oh, I've seen that you've worked in Canada for 2 or 3 years. Can you tell me which city you were living in? Or so you can do small talk at first. We're really good at that, North American people. And establish the link. So you want to say, what do you think about this? I've seen that you worked on a specific study. Do you find that your développement durable study in Alberta, which is our most polluted province, do you find that it made a difference? How did you go about? And so once you are interested in people, they'll be interested in you. If you come up front and you just want to ask them to do some things for you, they might say yes, but they might not establish contact later on. And use the networking to better understand where you want to go. It has to become a leverage, effet de levier, leverage impact, positive impact. So anything you do at networking is gonna give you results, but maybe in the longer run. So don't expect that because you're coming to this conference today and that you're sending me a LinkedIn invitation after, that I'll be able to help you find your internship tomorrow. If I don't understand where you come from, what you're looking for, what are your skills, if you eventually say, hey, this was really great at the conference, or can you tell me more about that? I might be more interested in keeping a link with you guys. I'm not saying that in 6 months or a year, if you say, hey, I'm not gonna say, hey, back, I will, but do remind me that we met here today, because it's important to establish link and say, put everything in context. So how? Are you familiar with the 6 degrees of separation theory? Okay. If one of you want to meet Justin Trudeau, do you know Justin Trudeau? He's pretty cute, eh? What's important is that if you want to meet Justin, or you're saying, oh, I really would like to talk to him to know more about how did he actually get there from studying law or whatever, I've studied with him. So eventually, before I started talking, you were saying, this guy is not accessible. I'm not saying that you'll get a meeting with him, I'm sorry. But I do know people that are really close to him, and I have been in contact with him in the past. So everybody here has maximum 5 people that can bring them to talk or to be in contact with the person you're aiming to, which is not much if you think about it. And I just gave you a simple example, but it's like that everywhere. If you start looking at it, I don't know if you use LinkedIn a lot, but you always see if it's your 1st degree, 2nd degree, or 3rd degree. The minute you come 1st degree with someone, then you become closer to the next person. So keep that in mind because it's really useful. So your first circles are your contacts, your colleagues. If you studied other programs before, it could be other alumni. Do not neglect linking up with them, because it's not because you're sitting beside each other that you know who's in the other one's network. So take advantage of that. Start your network with your close circle. Even though you're saying, okay, I'm aiming to work, I don't know, in communication marketing, and you meet someone that's working in operations or in a manufacturing company. So you're saying there's no interest in linking with that person. But yes, if you've studied with that person, if you eventually had a nice time at a party, if you like the way they work, the way the conversations you have, you can link up with that person. So do not neglect that, because then the second circle is the contacts of your contacts, And then when you get to the third, fourth, and fifth, like I gave the example before, is that you're coming closer and closer to people that have the same interest as you or that are in the industries that you're looking for your internship. So it's step by step, but it's really important that you do not neglect everything that's close to you. Personalize your approach. Imagine that you are a product or a service. So when you buy something, somebody tries to sell you something, they sell the product or the services. What happens now is that you are the product or the service, and you need to sell yourself. So there's a lot of intercultural differences in the fact that we sell ourselves. In North America, we're quite often comfortable with putting up front things that we accomplish, things that we do. I'll give the example with France. People are raised not to show off. The French people have tendency to describe what they can do as tasks and give the context and the history and all the rest, but they will not necessarily say, oh, I had a summer job at I don't know which company, and every month I was able to sell 25% more products than the guy that's been there for 3 years. So you're not going to be putting these things up front, which you should, because if a Canadian company is looking for you and they understand that you've got commercial skills and it's a commercial job, then it's nice to say, I was able to go beyond my objectives. And eventually, it's going to come to, how do you go about? What did you do different? Or what are the skills that you have that made a difference? And it could be simple skills, like listening skills. I took the time to listen to the customer and figured out that every 2 weeks they ordered stuff. So by observing that, I was making sure I would call them back every 10 days to make sure that their stock was okay. So it's a simple example, but it really, really it really pleases Canadian companies. Is all this clear to you? Yeah? Okay. It's not easy to do, though. I understand. Then you have to do your elevator pitch. And what's good about the circles, the networking circles I was talking earlier on, is that you can start testing your elevator pitch with your close circle, and you don't have any, y a pas de grands enjeux. There's no real problem in testing it with your close network. And as much as you try doing your elevator pitch, the more and more you become comfortable in doing it, and the more and more you know what pleases people you talk to or not. For an example, one thing, even though you are studying right now, in Canada, you never start by saying, I've studied in, or I'm doing this as a study. What's important to me is, what is the job that you want to do? What is the job that you have the skills for? So, I don't know, I'm a project manager with 2 years, I'm a bilingual project manager with 2 years experience in the luxury industry. I've worked for DR as a summer, or even, you don't say summer job, you say, I've worked for DR and accomplished X and Y in 3 months. So they don't need to know that the internship was just 3 months. What they want to hear is that you were able to accomplish something in 3 months. So when you introduce yourself, once again, I'm coming, and I'll repeat that a few times tonight, is you have to be pragmatic, and you have to show up front what you can bring. So once again, even again, if you're in an industry that requires a certain certification, engineers or stuff like that, you don't necessarily talk about that in the first 2 sentences. Then again, anyone that's doing computer engineering in France is not recognized as an engineer in Canada. In Canada, you're a civil engineer, but if a lot of French people are disappointed, or any French people that studied in French in IT as an engineer, you don't write on your resume that you're an IT engineer. It's just like that. It's something you need to know beforehand, because a lot of people are really disappointed when they get there, because the title is really important when you studied it here. So those are things, when I was saying you have to be curious about the country, those are things that are good to know before you leave. And when you introduce yourself or when you write it on your resume, you already know that you shouldn't write that. And the people appreciate the fact that you're actually updating your communication because you understand more and more the country. So you address yourself. It was then again about the product and the services that you are. You're not going to sell a car the same way to a 70-year-old man than to a 25-year-old woman. Maybe it's the same car, but you're not going to sell it the same way. So it's the same thing about yourself. So when do you schedule time to network? If I'm taking, for example, an event. Before an event, take the time to prepare. Sometimes, and most of the times, we just say, oh, there's a conference, I'm going to go, I'm going to listen, and you're going to decide after. You're not going to know if it's a good. You're not going to give yourself objectives. It's important that you say, okay, tonight I'm going to this conference with Marie-Hélène Garceau. Maybe look me up before or look at the company. I know my website needs to be updated, and so you can tell me, oh, you should have written that on your website. And maybe say, what are my objectives? What do I want? I'm going to leave this conference and I'm going to have these answers, or at least tips and tricks to find the answers. During the event, concentrate your efforts on your objectives. After the event, link up with the people, follow up on anything you might have said while you were at the conference, and follow up regularly with these contacts after the event. So tips and tricks to succeed. You might meet, let's say you lived in Lyon for 2 years, and we have a conversation and I tell you, oh, I'm going to go for the first time in Lyon next week. You can tell me, oh, do you want to know good restaurants to go to, or a place to stay, or stuff like that. So once again, as I was saying, you have one objective, finding a job, but you might want to approach people in different ways. And if you eventually give me suggestions, 10 days after I'm back, if I haven't said anything to you like, oh, thanks about your suggestions, they were great, you can actually buzz me and ask me if I had the opportunity to go and what I thought about it. So that's one way of having a win-win situation. It could be also that you studied in something that they want to develop in their company, and you might have figures and facts about Europe that could be useful for Canada. So it could be, oh, I'm going to share with you my paper and write to you 2-3 lines that are related with our conversation. So it could be day-to-day talks or something that's related to what the job you want. Keep your network informed. You're starting to looking for an internship. Eventually you'll find one. And eventually you'll do the paperwork and have your visa to be able to go work in Canada. So people that have helped you or that you crossed paths while you were doing that, you can send them a note. Oh, I just got my visa, I'm leaving on August 1st. Or small, you don't need to make a big plan and sit for like 2 days and write to everybody. Just do quick follow-ups, because you never know what people can bring to you in the future. Be pragmatic. So I was talking about it before. The good thing about the English language is that usually you can use less words to mean the same thing. when we have French resumes that are, as I mentioned before, very long and very descriptive and everything, we ask our customers to translate it in English, because eventually, if they don't put of the 3 times in the same sentence, they'll shorten their idea. And after that, we tell them, retranslate in French. And then the French version is really smaller. So take advantage of the English language and be pragmatic when you contact people. Don't be too vague. And if you have a question, ask the question. Another thing, when you contact people, you're going to say, would you have some time for a talk? Let's say you're contacting a vice president of a company. You were referred by your father to talk to, I don't know, Mr. Tremblay in Canada. If you speak to Mr. Tremblay, you send a message, oh, Mr. Tremblay, my father, Mr. I don't know, Smith, asked, told me I could contact you, blah, blah, blah. I would love to talk to you. When are you available? If that person is living like you and I, always on our phone, looking at our emails in the metro, doing 10,000 things at the same time, they might accept your LinkedIn invitation, maybe reply, or maybe not reply right away, and just like forget about it because it's not their priority. It is okay for you, 10 days, 2 weeks, 1 month after, to write back to these people. It's not because they're not answering that they're not available. But the tip I can give you is that it's much better to say, I'm available Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from noon your time until, I don't know, 3 o'clock. So what I've done now is that I didn't say I'm available one day at one time. I gave options. And the other thing I did is I actually gave the time on their calendar, not on your calendar. So once again, as I was saying before, you are adapting your communication to the country's communication. So if you want to succeed and have more chances to talk to people, propose 2 or 3 schedule. And what might happen is that they say, if they don't take one of these 3, they can actually this week I'm not available, but the following week I'll be available Tuesday at, I don't know, 10 o'clock Toronto time. So you're actually like building a relationship based on pragmatic and very efficient North American ways to do it. How many of you are actually on LinkedIn? Because I've been talking about it all the time. Okay, almost everybody. Are you using LinkedIn beyond your just profile and the network you have? Anyone using, anyone posting stuff? Okay, a few of you. Are anyone sharing posts that you see? Okay. LinkedIn is the largest professional network, at least in North America. You've got the influencers and the decision makers on that network. It's a network like other social medias that work with keywords. So if there are keywords for your industry, make sure they appear, because you're going to be seen more easily if you use these keywords. And it's a perfect monitoring tool to know what's going on. So just like other social media networks, once you start looking for stuff you like in Canada that are in your industry, eventually your thread is going to show things from Canada. So without too much effort, your thread is going to give you information that are going to help you find more information about your industry there. Same thing when you link up to people of your industry. You might not, though, appear on researches from Canadians' HR, because you're geographically based here, possibly, or based somewhere else. So you're going to appear in researches of people that are closer to you. It's more difficult to appear on researches done from people in Canada. But if you're linking to people in Canada and you're actually posting relevant things about your industry and subjects that are of interest, these people are going to share your thread. And now you're going to appear. Somebody's going to see you. If you eventually comment and tag a company, a person, it's really short. I'm sure you do it with your friends on whatever network you use that I might not be using anymore. But make sure you do the same thing. Stay professional, but share and be present. It's really important. And the idea is when you look at somebody's profile, look at their job now, but look at the jobs they had before. I'm going back to that person that you just met 2 days ago that worked 3 years in Canada and came back. So you're interested in that person today, but you're actually interested in that person 3 years ago. So look at somebody's profile from the beginning. Maybe they did the same school as you. Maybe they worked in a company you've worked in. So that's the perfect way to start the win-win relationship, saying, oh, I see that you... It happens to me that sometimes I see someone and we have 50, 60, 80 contacts in common. So the first thing I do is I actually go and check out the contacts we have in common to understand which one of my interests that person is related to. And I could use the intro sentence, hi, I see that we have this person in common. It's very interesting. I saw her 2 weeks ago and blah, blah, blah. So really look throughout the profile and expand your network. It's really, really important. Learning about the country. So here is a subject that you all want to know about. I'm not an immigration certified consultant. We work with people that are certified. The best thing to do if you haven't started to, for any country, but Canada is a good way to start, is to go on the website, Ambassade du Canada en France, for example, and look at the information, which might sometimes be a little bit complicated, but also register to follow some webinars. Sometimes it's webinars, sometimes it's live events. The event that I was talking to you about that is going on right now, they actually did all their immigration sessions also remotely, so you could follow up. When you do internships, there's a specific program that's called International Experience Canada. It's for people between 18 and 35 years old. And there's 3 programs: internship, young professionals, and working holiday visa. The idea is to go and look at which correspond to what you're aiming. The working holiday visa in Canada, you also have to look at your residency or your citizenship to see if you're eligible for the programs. So the internship and the young professionals are visas that you can obtain once you found the company that want to hire you either for the internship or for the 2 months young professional if you're French, a citizen. The working holiday visa, if you're a French citizen or a French resident, is a 2 year, so a 24 month as well, but it's draw. So there's over 6,750 chances to be drawn, sometimes a little bit more, but you have to understand that it's either I get it and I have the opportunity to work and or travel in Canada without having a company beforehand. But it might take some time. We have customers that are drawn in 2 weeks, and we have some customers that are drawn in 2 years. So it's a different kind of project. But for the internship, it's really interesting to look. I would suggest that you search, and that's why our LinkedIn is very useful, and your alumni contact book is search for companies that have hired people from abroad. Because even though you're really interested in that local company that's really sexy and very innovative, if they've never recruited someone from abroad, they're less likely to say from one day to another, okay, we're going to do it. There's always the chance, what we do when a company does it for the first time, either the person that's doing the internship or finding a job, we actually take the time to have our experts talk for free at first to the customer and make them understand what are their rights, what they have to do, and what are their links with you once you actually sign the contract, and what are the steps to have the internship. Actually, there was in EIC, there's 4 programs. There's also a study program. Make sure that you actually do the procedure before you actually step foot in Canada. The immigration border is really Canadian. It follows the rules, and so make sure that you have the papers, you have a return ticket, you have, if required, the funds or the insurance that is required. Because if, for example, for certain EIC programs, if you don't have the proper insurance for let's say your internship is 6 months and you took an insurance for 3 months, they're actually going to give you your visa for 3 months. So down the road, you're stuck because you legally can't stay and study because you don't have the authorization. So there's a few things like that when we're excited about the fact that we actually found a job and that we're asking for the immigration papers. Sometimes we tend to do things a little bit quickly, and I've heard parents calling us a few months after their child has left, saying we received an expulsion letter from Canada because we didn't do the paperwork in time. It's really, really more complicated to fix the situation after, especially if your idea is I'll go do the internship and then I want to follow through and continue working there with another type of visa. So I'm not here to scare you. I'm just here to tell you that Canada is really strict in their rules. And if you, let's say you want to say to the company, yes, I'll be there in 2 weeks. I've rarely seen a visa given out in 2 weeks. So the company must understand the process has to go through, and you get the visa. So the website for the Canadian procedures are, you can look at the embassy, Ambassade du Canada, and you'll get all the information on immigration, and you'll get also the information on the future information sessions. If you're interested about different provinces, how many of you know, can someone tell me how many provinces there are in Canada? There's 10 provinces and 3 territories. What is the capital of Canada? Ah, nice. Congratulations. That's where Justin lives. So really look, and if we're looking for visas that are more long-term, I'm coming back as well as the skills, the language skills that you have. It might be interesting if you are, you have a certain skill and you say, okay, I want to go into the province of Quebec, but you also see that the skills are required in another province. There's a lot of French people that want to go to Quebec. So if you eventually have the language skills, make sure you look at the other provinces. I had the map before. The map I showed you is an interactive map that's available on the web, and you had the francophone population in each province. So if you need to have a contact with the French, you'll find the contact. But if you have the language skills and the skills to do the job, you might want to look outside of Quebec. For long-term immigration papers, some provinces have specific programs. Y a la mobilité francophone. So if you speak French for all provinces except Quebec, sometimes there's facilities for a more longer-term job. In Quebec, the system is new for the permanent residency, so we don't know. We know that in the past it was taking at least 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, maybe 3, to get the permanent residency. They just changed the system, so we don't know how long it's going to take. We hope it's going to be faster. But knowing and understanding your immigration processes is important as well. Because I'm not, again, saying you should tell the employer, I know I need this visa. But you need to yourself understand. So first you sell yourself with your skills. And later on, you'll have conversation on things you understand and they understand. So it's really important to take these, and there are some sessions in English for immigration. What is the employment situation in the city or in the province you want to go? So you can look at Statistique Canada. You can also look at the papers because they keep on saying, oh, we're looking for skilled workers in this industry and that and that. In a province, in a city like Quebec City, there's, I didn't check lately, but the unemployment rate is between 3 and 4%. So it's full employment. If you have skills that are relevant to the city of Quebec, it might be interesting to look there. You've got a really, really, really nice, interesting low unemployment rate in Canada. So that's another reason why they're looking for people. You're young, you've got the potential to eventually have a family there. So they like that because they want people to help our country be more international than it is already, which is an immigration country, so that we already have a lot of cultures. But Canada is really aiming for their future, and you are most probably a good asset for the future of Canada. HR experience, HR policy. I was talking about how fast we can hire and let go someone. That's something really important to know. Because I don't know if you had the chance to work here with a CDD or something like that, but you know that the rules are different. So do not expect the rules that you know already be the same in Canada. It was not a common practice when I left 18 years ago to pay half the transportation or to, we absolutely have no clue what are tickets restaurant in Canada. So things like that. They're offering me a salary, but don't look only at the salary. Look at what are the advantages that go with it. So you can never compare a salary in euros and in Canada because you might be disappointed. But do look at the imposition rate. So in France, soon we'll have impôt à la source, but in Canada it's already like that. You've got government sites where you can actually calculate and see how much money you'll really have. The thing is, they're already taking the money from your paycheck. So when you look at your budget, where am I going to stay? What budget do I have to eat? There's really, really good restaurants in Toronto and Montreal. So you need to check that out. But that's part also of your experience, because you don't want to go there and just work and eat rice and drink beer if you like beer, because there's a lot of beer there. I think someone tried our microbrasserie. It's cheaper, in fact. So yeah, it's important to understand what are the hiring process, what are the it's okay for you when you have a first contact and they say, okay, your profile is interesting and everything, you can say, what are the next steps? Once again, we're really down to earth, step by step. We like things that are square. Job market, I already talked about that. Yeah, so the idea, I think now you know, like, can you really search from abroad? I would say yes, but the idea is find some job offers and use those job offers to create your network. Find this, I don't know when you're looking for your internships, if it's next spring or in a year from now, but it's interesting to look at job offers today and eventually see that the company is looking for the same type of profile every 6 months. So you're actually gaining up that data for yourself. And when you contact them, you can ask, oh, did you have a growth in the last year? Because I saw that you were hiring people with that profile. So it helps you understand more. And coming back to the social networks, in the job offers, you've got keywords that you can reuse on your LinkedIn profile and on your resume. So do start networking as soon as you can. Look at job offers, you can apply, but don't be disappointed if they don't answer, because especially if you have a picture and your address here and no immigration status, because they want to hire for yesterday, they're not even going to go further. So you can have a really, really nice resume and they're not going to go beyond your contact information, because you're telling them up front that you're not there, you're not available, and you don't have a visa that allows them to hire you. So use the network and find people that work in that company that can give you more information about how it works, and if they've hired before people with coming from abroad. I'm not gonna go, your integration can start also before you leave. Make sure you do all your medication exams before you go. It's much nicer to make sure they're different. But I'm giving you an example here. I'm using an example for Quebec. There's two images here. I don't know if you see them properly. Here it says, attention, tu vas tomber, papa va t'aider. And there you have, vas-y, t'es capable. So I guess you already understand which one is the North American way and which one is the more French way, is that you need to understand that there are differences. This one is a really simple example, but it's the reality. Yes? Okay, the first one says, watch out, you're gonna fall, daddy's gonna help you. And the other one says, go, you can do it. So you see the parents are not there, so there were actually more like bring people. So there are cultural differences on a day-to-day basis, but also at work. If you start doing events with the Canadian community here, because we are, I'm not the only crazy one that came here, we're more than one, you can start noticing these differences. So what we always say, it's in Quebec, yes, we do speak French, so we speak the same language, but in French we say on parle la même langue, mais un langage différent. So we don't use, it's like the Americans and the English, we have some words that have a very different meaning. We're not going to get into how Canadians use English expressions that they translate, or how French can use sometimes English like pressing and shopping. In Quebec, we'll use magasinage. Things like that are really small details. But actually, when you go to work, you can see these differences. My colleague, Émilie Saunier, who's responsible of the recruitment at Kennedy Garceau, she worked 2 years in Canada. And the French people, when they hung up, they were saying bonjour. So it's as if they were saying welcome when they first started the call, and welcome when they hung up. And she was like that, but why are they saying bonjour? To have a nice day, in English we say, you can hang up and say have a nice day. But in France, you don't say bonjour when you hang up. So she was like, why are they saying that? There's a few things like that that's important to understand before you leave. The difference in languages and accents. Networking is a booster. Plan a trip, as I was mentioning before. Plan a trip before you go. Get feedback from people around you, and learn about the day-to-day life. You might want to stay in a, I don't know, maybe a colocation. I don't know if you're doing that here, but it's really often that we do that in Canada. Understand what's a 4.5, what does it mean, what's the half. Understand maybe winter. I don't know if some of you are scared of winter. So you're not scared of winter, you're okay. You're okay, and actually I have friends who sent me, I should have added it. I don't know if you saw snow. Yeah, it's snowing right now, and today someone sent me a picture and I should have added it, but yes, winter is there. But you can wear boots and have the proper equipment and survive. I survived before I moved here, and it's part of life. Yes, in Montreal there's a city under the city. Between you and I, it's not the sexiest place to go. It's just like stores and metro and stuff like that. But if you're freezing and you want to go from one building to another, you can go through the tunnels. It's just a series of tunnels that they use to promote the city, but there's other nicer things in Montreal than so really, and check if you're ready for winter. Eventually, if you leave around this period or in January, you can buy your equipment there. Just make sure you have something warm to get there, but you can buy the equipment there as well. I talked a lot. I hope you guys have questions. You can stay in touch. Facebook, on our website, kennedygarceau.com. Twitter, LinkedIn. What we do is there's no problem in having a first contact. You reach out to me. I now have a calendar that I send you. We can take half an hour to talk, just like that. It's free. It's interesting and everything. We do webinars that are free. We do always stuff like working on your CV. Or LinkedIn, use LinkedIn as a networking tool, but also as, I don't know if some of you use Excel. You can use Excel and just do additions, or you can do Excels and do graphs and accounting and everything. LinkedIn is exactly like that. You can just be there and exist, or you can actually I have business cards as well. As I'm North American, I have my business cards. I can give you cards if you want. So we do a LinkedIn outil de veille, and if you want me to do it in English, we can do that. So these sessions like CV and LinkedIn are not free, but we can look at a solution that suits your budget and that actually helps you find your internship and have a revenue sooner. The objective is really to succeed in your project. If after looking at all the information from the government on immigration you have questions, we can put you in contact with our experts. Finding an apartment there from here, because I don't know, you have a spouse and a cat. I didn't talk about that in housing, but if you have a cat or a dog, for example, there's a lot of owners that do not welcome people with animals, so you actually have to find people that do. So it's just like you've got people that do, but yeah, it's just a little bit less offers for the apartments. So those are things to do. I'm pretty pragmatic because I'm Canadian. Anything you have questions on, I don't have all the answers, but I can help you and guide you.
You said that Canadians hire only people who have skills that are needed. So from your point of view, what are now the basic skills, not the basic, but like general? Like, for example, like, I don't know, Canada like hires a lot of programists or something like this. So what do you think, what skills are needed, what profiles they want now?
Okay, if you allow me, first of all, I'd like you maybe to tell me what's your interest, what are your skills, or if you know you have a job title already, it's nice that you introduce yourself in telling me who you are. So we start doing what I was saying before, being pragmatic. So what are you studying in, or what's your interest in?
Okay, I studied digital marketing and data science. So after this study, I will be like both in both spheres. And now it's like not a lot of job titles. I'm very interested in content management, especially in some alcohol industry, but I don't know like in Canada if it is very widespread. And also I'm very interested in IT and technology, like in content manager of B2B companies that do something really new and cool. And
Artificial intelligence, maybe?
maybe I'm thinking about it a little, just I'm getting into, because like before I never touched this point, like I was out of even digital marketing. I was a marketer, like traditional marketer. And just what I was telling, like why I said about like general skills, because there are a lot of people of very long profiles. And also like my boyfriend, and we want to immigrate together to Canada. He's a programmist, so I'm also like want to know what the niches for programmers to immigrate there, of course.
There's a lot of interesting things. I'll just, because immigration is an important aspect, depending on the type of visa that one of you is going to have, most of the times the spouse or the boyfriend or girlfriend can have an open visa. Not all the time, some of the times. But one thing that's really important is that you're able to prove that you have at least 1 year of common, that you've been living together, or you have common papers together. So you might want to check that out, or eventually look at the fact, and in your case it might be interesting, that each one of you look for opportunities separately, because you're not officially a spouse in the Canadian way. I'm not saying you need to get married or anything. I'm not going there, but it's important to know. There's one thing I heard in your question that you didn't mention, is the fact that you don't necessarily have a lot of experience. So you're saying to yourself, our company is going to hire us because we don't have a lot of experience. I think you must find a way to put up front the skills that you brought, either in projects that you did for schools or for internships, because it's not, as I mentioned before, it's not because it was an internship that it doesn't count as a real job that you did. It's not because you weren't paid or not paid a lot that it doesn't mean that you didn't accomplish anything. It's not because you did it outside the school program that it's not something that you want to put up front. So remember all these things that you can put up front. As for the skills, every province have different needs. I was mentioning a few areas before. IT is pretty much standard throughout the provinces, but as I mentioned earlier on, artificial intelligence, I was asking because Montreal is starting to grow as a center of artificial intelligence. And the other way, so you can look at the provinces, look at Guichet Emploi, there's the French and the English version of Guichet Emploi on the embassy's site. You always see, so Guichet, J-U-I-C-H-E, I can even put it up if you want. Yeah, you look at Guichet Emploi, and for your job title, you're going to see what are the perspectives. And as well, what I would actually encourage you to do is start listening to Radio-Canada in a podcast. So they have French and English for most cities. It's a 10-minute or 8-minute information period, and you're actually going to learn more about what's happening in the province or in the city that interests you. So IT is something that I don't know how much experience your boyfriend has, but if you're yourself mostly content marketing, you have more people that do the same thing as you in the country. So you have to find out how to convince them that the skills that you have are really important for them. It could be that you speak Russian. No, but you have to go beyond the job. It could be one other aspect that you have. If your boyfriend is a programmer in, I don't know, Kanban or a Scrum Master, or if he has like certain skills like that, they're really, really looking for people with those kinds of skills. So if he can also, on his side, look on what he has to offer, you might be happy to see that there's opportunities. So it's Guichet Emploi. I'll put you the English site so you have the URL, jobbank.gc.ca. That should be really easy to remember. I know you're probably tired. It's Friday evening. And I did talk about beer, so you're maybe thinking about the aperitif. So I could put content management. So you can work around. As I mentioned before, use your keywords and go dig, search, use different keywords to say the same thing, and so you'll find. We'll see if it finds a. So here you've got different titles that do apply or not, but you'll have what we call the NOC. In French is, in French it's NOC, in English it's CNP. It's the code that represents your job. And when you go look at that code, you'll see what are the perspective, what are the skills required, what are the salaries. So you'll have all that in one basic tool. And as you see here, you've got an M, but if we go further down, we'll see other symbols. It shows that if you're looking for a job in British Columbia, it's actually going to go from the federal portal to the British Columbia portal. But some provinces, I would say probably Manitoba or Saskatchewan, they use the portal from the government. So it's go and navigate on this site that's, once again, not super attractive, but here you'll see this one job is in Quebec, and you've got the possibility. So I'll look afterwards, taking another question. Did I understand? Okay. And I'll try to find a NOC, code d'identification, so you can see how to find the information. And another question?
You talked about some facilities to help you go to other provinces other than Quebec if you're a French speaker. Mm-hmm. Is there a name that we can Google to have more info on this?
What are your skills? What are you studying in?
So same as Xenia, I'm studying in digital marketing and data
You're
science.
Not her boyfriend?
No.
No, okay.
And I'm more interested into the data science field.
Okay.
And I would prefer to go to British Columbia, so
nice.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I know that it's not French speaking, so I would like to know if there's like other things I could try to find out on this.
Okay, I'll use just data. Let's say I know it doesn't apply totally, but you need to do the search. Database analyst and database administrator. Okay, I understand that it's not that. But you look here, so you've got different job titles. So when I was talking about keywords, is that you can really, if you click on it, you'll see tons of keywords. This one has like just a few, but sometimes it's a very long list. You'll know more what you need. They'll also say, just like we did now, okay, it's not because you wrote data and you went there that you're not an information system analyst in consulting. If you think you correspond more to one of this exclusion, you click on the number and you go in it. So after that, you'll have The matrix doesn't work. You'll have information. So what I would suggest is first you go to this site, Guichet Emploi, so jobbank.gc.ca, with the NOC that you've identified, and it's going to give you, just like I showed before, the job per cities. And if the information is on the federal portal, you'll have it there. If it's on the provincial portal, to answer your question, it's going to bring you to the province portal. If you want to go directly to the British Columbia portal, it's this one, workbc.ca. So it's usually a little bit nicer than the federal one, but it's the same information. So you'll get to have precise information about that province and see if your skills are required. For sure, in your fields, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver are places where they need your skills. You might want to go beyond that and say, I'm interested in the film industry, maybe like something like that, and then say, okay, Vancouver is the great place to be, or maybe around it. Do not neglect the cost of life, as Vancouver is a little bit more expensive. I think it's the most expensive city in Canada. It's probably one of the nicest one, also for the view and everything. But do think about that before you move, to make sure you've got enough money to be able to be comfortable. The other thing we do, and that you'll have for certain, if you decide to go there and study a little bit longer, you have to make sure that you study in programs that are eligible for immigration. And once you get an immigration paper to study for a program, you're allowed to work 20 hours per week while you're studying. And during the summer, you can work 40 hours a week. So that's something we do. When I was younger and studying, I was working. If eventually it's something you can have a side job, or have a job in the company you're going to have your internship in, and you want to stay there. So that's another way to be able to enjoy the country as well as working.
Yeah, well, actually my question is about the equivalence in terms of certificates. We all know that the systems are not the same, Canada compared to France. Could I, for example, apply for a job requiring a master's degree with my master's degree got here in France, or shall I undertake another program once in Canada for me to get the same level, or to get to be considered as someone who get the same level than what I have here in France? Thank you.
Do you have an example of a master that you want to put up front?
Maybe the master degree I'm attending at the moment. I'm doing quantitative finance here at EMLYON. Could I apply, for example, for a job requiring a master degree in the same field?
Okay, there's actually two questions in your question. There's the fact that it is interesting, depending on the province you go to ask for an équivalence de diplôme. Okay. So most of the time, it's just paperwork and time. And that's something you can start from here. And I actually encourage that you do that before you leave, because you're gaining time. Okay. The other aspect of it is if it's I only have the French, I haven't been speaking English much lately, so if it's a profession réglementée, if it's a lawyer, psychologist, doctor, an accountant. So you do have some professions that require that you have, and I'll use the word license, which is not the appropriate one, but I'll use just for the example. So you can ask for equivalence of your diploma, and they're gonna say if it's recognized, because there's a system that they're used to doing that and everything, as much as they understand what the program held, and now they know some of the programs. So it's sometimes easy, sometimes longer. But if you're an accountant and you go into the province of Ontario, you might have to contact the professional order, and that's something you see in your NOC definition. The number I was showing you before, you go all the way to the end and it says to you, you need to contact this professional order. So you contact the engineers, you contact them in the province that you're going to, because if you contact Manitoba to go to British Columbia, it's not going to give you any information that's accurate. So you contact them and you see, do I need to do some exams? Do I need to pay for my license? When you're an engineer, a civil engineer, in a province like Quebec, you have to eventually be a junior engineer for 2 years. So even if you've been working here for 15 years as an engineer, you have to go back to junior for 2 years, work, and after 2 years, you'll get the title, and then you can sign some architectural plans or stuff like that. The other thing you might run into in psychology, you've got some provinces that let you work in that field if you have a doctorate. So if you have a master's here and you ask for the equivalence is given, but you're not going to be able to be a psychologist there because it asks for a doctorate. So you really have to look depending on the province. And once again, either looking at the professional order or asking for equivalence of diploma, start that before you leave. You'll have time. This engineer that only has 2 years, he can actually, or nurses and stuff like that, they can actually start their 2 years before, because if they're welcome in the ordre professionnel, from that day on, the 2 years starts. And if they move in 2 months, then they're gaining 2 months. It might give you a better salary sooner.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions?
Yeah, my name is Emmanuel. I'm also a student at the digital marketing and data science here at EMLYON. My question simply is, you mentioned that one would need a visa, the necessary visa for a particular reason for migrating to Canada. When you look at the job, most of the companies will tell you, do you have eligibility to work in Canada? So, and that kind of give like a restriction to prospect. I know you talked about the IEC, is that correct?
Wait, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
Ambassade. Have a nice evening. That's nice. The first results gives you an no, we don't want to faire la visa immigration. If you do decide to go and travel to Canada before, just to do a winter trip and start enjoying winter, or if you want to go a few months before to have a few contacts, 2 things you need to know. There's I don't know the word in English. You know, like in the States, you need to have an ETSTA to go into the States. There's the same thing in Canada now. So before you have a working visa, if you travel before, you need to have that as well. So make sure it's $7. So if you go on a site that charges you $30, it's not the right site. Be careful. And the other thing is, if you're looking for a job and you've got meetings scheduled to find companies and stuff like that, make sure you don't have them on your phone or in your computer, because you're not supposed to proactively go look for a job in the country if you don't have the authorization. So, and they can search your phone. So just make sure you do have the appointments, but maybe informal appointments, and not go, at the time it was easy because we would travel with like paper resumes, and so they would actually open our suitcase and see the paper resumes. Now you've got all the electronic formats. So just make sure, because if they catch you physically looking for a job, going from door to door in companies, it could actually put a black mark on your future request for immigration. Donc, visiter. So I'll put it in English. Sorry. That's a good thing about Canada. Everything's in both languages. Almost. So you here have different information. You want to study, you want to go work. So if you go work, get a work permit. Students, International Experience Canada. So here we are. So work and travel in Canada with International Experience Canada. The end of the URL is iec.html. How to participate? So eventually you can go and look there. You should have a presentation of the 4 different visas they have, and the eligibility. So your citizenship, it might be, you see, working holiday visas for people that are in France. French citizen is 24 months, but if you're from Belgium, it's 1 year. So make sure you look at the details to make sure that you're not going in the wrong path.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah?
Yep.
You've got a nice infographic here that gives you all the information. The other new thing in Canada is the biometry. Now that when you ask for a visa, they're gonna want your finger prints, and that's just adding a little bit budget to ask for your visa, and as well the process is a little bit longer because of that. So do integrate that in your process. Is that it? Thank you all. And do keep me posted if you want a business card, and keep me posted on how it's going. And if you do contact me on LinkedIn, write me a personalized note just to say what you liked, what you missed, what you want to do next. I'll be happy to hear from you. Thanks.